We need to talk about how bad Jack Daniels tastes. I might just make a whole video talking about that because it tastes like butt. Whiskey is one of the most popular spirits out there, with many countries having their own take on the stuff. It's often debated which country makes the best whiskey. And another thing debated about this drink is its name. In all my years of consuming alcoholic beverages, which trust me are quite a few, I had never noticed there were two different spellings of the word whiskey. There's a version that contains the letter E between the K and the Y, and there's one that lacks the E entirely. Now, granted, this isn't the biggest difference in these names, yet there is a huge debate over which kind of whiskey receives which spelling, with different countries' takes on the stuff using different spellings. This debate is seemingly concentrated on the whiskies produced in Ireland and Scotland. Irish whiskey uses the E spelling, while Scottish whiskey uses the spelling without the E. This is then transferred over to whiskies of other nations too, noticeably in American and Japanese whiskies. The USA uses the E spelling, while Japanese whiskey uses the no E spelling. In fact, seemingly most other whiskies, minus the Irish and American stuff, use the no E spelling. French, Taiwanese and Australian whiskey all lack an E too. We will mainly be focusing on the whiskies produced in Ireland, Scotland, USA and Japan for this video, however. These different spellings aren't done willy-nilly, however. There is history and a reason as to what spelling each nation's whiskey goes with. The first thing we need to ask ourselves is, where does that word of whiskey actually come from in the first place? Well, it seemingly has its origins in the Scottish Gaelic Uscaber, which translates into meaning the water of life, because this stuff was considered that precious, man. The water of life sounds like something Indiana Jones would go hunting for or something. But it's from this term that eventually got corrupted into the modern word of whiskey. And from this origin, you can start to understand where the debate in this spelling came from. While coming from Scottish Gaelic, there were debates as to who created this drink first. Some believe it was Ireland, while others believe it was Scotland. There's also argument over whose whiskey is better. Irish whiskey tends to be triple distilled, giving it a smoother flavour, while Scottish whiskey tends to be double distilled, giving it a much stronger alcoholic taste. What you personally prefer, however, that's entirely up to you. Like, you choose that. If you want the strong double distilled, like the Scots, go for it. But if you want that smoother taste like Ireland, well, that's there for you as well. It's from this difference in production style and tastes and overall argument between the two nations as to how these two spellings of the name came into being. In the early 19th century, Scottish whiskey was seen as being a very poor in quality kind of drink, especially compared to the stuff coming out of Ireland. Irish whiskey producers didn't want their drink being confused with a much inferior product. At this time, whiskey without the E was seemingly the go-to spelling for the drink, so to help Irish whiskey stand out from the rest of the pack, they added that E into the word, creating the whiskey spelling. So if consumers of the drink were confused over where their drink was coming from, and if they were getting the good Irish stuff or the bad Scottish stuff, all they had to do was check the spelling, and if there was an E in there, it meant they were drinking the far superior version. Now, however, Scottish whiskey is very much on par with the Irish stuff, but those different spellings have stuck around. And while that explains the difference in spelling between Irish and Scottish whiskey, how have the whiskies of other countries ended up with their respective spellings? But before we look into that, I want to say a huge thank you to my most recent patrons and super thanks leavers. So a huge thank to new patron Nyla98 and super thanks leaver Craig XJ87. Patron is the best way to financially support Name Explain, and donating just $1 a month gets you ad-free videos, a chance to say what names unexplained, an exclusive monthly newsletter, and your name at the end of these videos. All of that can be found at patreon.com/nameexplain, which will be linked down below. Conversely, if you want to just make a one-time donation, you can leave a super thanks directly in the comments section of any of my videos here on YouTube. They help out tremendously too. Thank you. Anyway, where were we? Now, I believe we were going to look into how the other nations chose their spelling of the word whiskey. The choice in spelling seemingly came down to what kind of whiskey inspired their whiskey. As mentioned, the USA used the spelling featuring an E. This is because many American whiskies were heavily inspired by the stuff coming out of Ireland, and the reasoning behind this is due to the huge amount of Irish migration to the USA in centuries past. Like, isn't it something like there's more Irish people in Boston than there are in Ireland? Like, you know, Ireland and America have a very close history of one another when it comes to immigration and whatnot. I'm sure you know that. You might be Irish American watching this video. You might be Irish watching this video. You might be Irish British like I am watching this video. Hello if you've got any kind of Irishness in you. Glad you're watching. These Irish migrants brought their whiskey along with them, and it made itself home in the land of the free. What's also interesting is the fact that while Irish whiskey is triple distilled, not all American whiskey is, but they still use the E spelling regardless of the amount of distills. One of the USA's most famous whiskies, Jack Daniels, is only distilled once, which probably explains why it tastes so bad. Like, seriously, we need to talk about how bad Jack Daniels tastes. I might just make a whole video talking about that, because it tastes like butt. Like, I think that stuff only gets by in its branding and packaging. Like, I don't think anyone actually likes the taste of it. They just think it looks cool. But yeah, maybe that's just me. Maybe I just can't handle my drink or something. Like, I'm not a real American like that. Sorry, Jack. Sorry to disappoint you. Japanese whiskey, as mentioned, however, lacks the E, and this is simply because Japanese whiskey was heavily inspired by the Scottish stuff. In fact, Japanese whiskey came into being because people in Japan wanted to recreate the Scottish style as closely as possible. Because of this, it only makes sense that they would use the E-less spelling of the word. It's pretty cool they wanted to copy the Scottish stuff, especially considering the fact that for some time Scottish whiskey was seen as far inferior, and I imagine most other nations outside of Ireland and the US used the spelling without the E for their take on it because they too were inspired by the whiskey from Scotland, or at least inspired by one which was initially inspired by the Scottish drink. Like, I saw there was Taiwanese whiskey, and I think Taiwanese whiskey was inspired by Japanese whiskey, and Japanese whiskey was inspired by Scottish whiskey, so they all used the E-less spelling. That's just my own hypothesis on the matter anyway. What helped put a stop to much of this confusion, however, is the fact that different kinds of whiskies have ended up having their own unique names, so they don't have to deal with the whole to E or not to E confusion. For example, just bourbon is a popular name for certain whiskies produced in the USA, and Scottish whiskies, in many cases, is simply referred to as just Scotch. Yeah, I never hear that. Like, whenever I watch the TV show, they're like, I'll have a Scotch on the rocks or something like that. That's just whiskey. It's just Scottish whiskey. Scotch isn't a separate drink. At least I don't think so anyway. I probably should have looked into that before I declared that, but I don't know, like, people say weird things on the internet all the time, right? Maybe this is just one more weird, wrong thing on the internet. So, next time you are buying some whiskey, take a look at the label and see if there's an E or not, and it will tell you where that drink has come from, or just get it down you as quickly as possible. Either works fine. But anyway, please share the topic down below we could cover in next Monday's Name Explain video. It can be about literally anything, and the topic can be as niche or broad as you like. I will then choose 3 of those topics and place them in a poll for my patrons to vote on. Then the winner from that poll will be the topic covered in next Monday's Name Explain video. You can vote in that poll, as well as enjoy many other great benefits by visiting patreon.com/Name Explain, which will be linked down below, and by donating just $1 a month. Thank you. Anyway, that's more than enough for myself, but don't forget to go follow me on Instagram where I'm NameExplainYT, and don't forget to join the Facebook page Friends of Name Explain, where you can chat with myself and many other name nerds. Okay all, take care. We all nice in shot? I think so. Let's film a video. Yeah. The USA or... There's a history... Sorry, door sound. What does the word whiskey... I need to remember how to pronounce that word. Hey, I'm back. So, yeah, I had to check how to pronounce that word. Uskaber, it's pronounced, obviously. There are debates as to who created Kukreger. That one again, with a bit more question in my voice. Blah, 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 blah. It's pretty cool they wanted to copy the Scottish stuff. Copy the Scottish stuff. So they didn't have to deal with the whole E or not. I need to get this bit right because I find a little Shakespeare pun. I've said the word whiskey too many times now, Amber, and it sounds weird. Whiskey, 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 whiskey. I'm going to whisk myself away from this video.